Your soulmate is saying, I need to tell you what happened today. It's very urgent, please open this. Don't skip. Listen carefully. The morning began just like countless mornings before it. The first rays of sunlight quietly slipped through the curtains, covering the room with warm shades of gold. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window carrying the fresh scent of rain, blooming flowers, and the promise of a brand new day. Birds welcomed the sunrise with cheerful songs. Somewhere nearby, a neighborhood bakery unlocked its doors, filling the streets with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children hurried toward school with bright smiles. Neighbors greeted one another while watering colorful gardens. Everything appeared wonderfully ordinary. Nothing suggested that this quiet morning would become one they would remember for years. Because your heart needs this right now, because life often changes through ordinary moments rather than extraordinary ones. For a long time, someone had been carrying words they never found the courage to speak. Not because they wanted to keep secrets. Not because they didn't care deeply. But because they believed waiting for the perfect moment would somehow make everything easier. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Every time they almost spoke, uncertainty whispered. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow became another tomorrow. Eventually they realized something important. Sometimes waiting too long creates more distance than honesty ever could. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful relationships grow through sincere communication instead of endless postponement. That morning they prepared a simple breakfast. A warm cup of tea rested beside the window. Instead of rushing into another busy day, they quietly watched the neighborhood awaken. A father patiently helped his daughter tie her shoes. An elderly couple walked hand in hand beneath the trees. A young neighbor stopped to help someone pick up groceries that had spilled across the sidewalk. Simple acts. Quiet kindness. Nothing dramatic. Yet each moment gently reminded them that love is usually expressed through ordinary faithfulness rather than extraordinary speeches. Because your heart needs this right now, because everyday kindness often leaves lifelong memories. After breakfast they reached toward an old notebook resting quietly on a nearby shelf. Its cover had faded through years of use. Inside were handwritten pages filled with hopes, dreams, prayers, questions, disappointments, gratitude, and lessons. Turning each page felt like visiting earlier versions of themselves. The hopeful version. The uncertain version. The impatient version. The version who believed every answer needed to arrive immediately. And the version slowly learning that wisdom often grows through patience. Because your heart needs this right now, because every season of life teaches something valuable when we remain willing to learn. They opened to a fresh blank page. For several quiet moments nothing happened. The pen rested gently against the paper. Finally they wrote one simple sentence. If I could send one honest message today, what would it say? The question lingered. Then another sentence slowly appeared. I don't want fear to speak louder than love anymore. Reading those words filled their eyes with unexpected tears. Not because everything suddenly became easier, but because they had finally admitted something their heart had known for a long time. Because your heart needs this right now, because honesty with ourselves often becomes the first step toward healing. Later that morning they decided to visit the familiar park where they often reflected whenever life felt uncertain. Towering oak trees stretched toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes moved softly through the branches. The peaceful lake reflected drifting white clouds like polished glass. Families gathered beneath shady trees. Children laughed while chasing butterflies through colorful gardens. Everything invited them to slow down. They found their favorite wooden bench overlooking the lake. Instead of searching desperately for answers, they simply watched life unfold. Because your heart needs this right now, because stillness often reveals wisdom that busyness hides. Nearby, a young boy struggled to build a small model boat with his grandfather. One piece refused to fit correctly. The child sighed. "I'll never finish." His grandfather smiled warmly. "Every beautiful thing takes patience. Don't quit because one moment feels difficult." Those simple words quietly settled into their heart. Perhaps relationships worked the same way. Perhaps difficult conversations didn't mean failure. Perhaps they were simply part of building something stronger. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting relationships are strengthened through patience and perseverance. The morning slowly became afternoon. Walking beside the peaceful lake, they noticed an elderly woman sitting beneath a flowering tree, writing in a small journal. Curious, they smiled politely. She smiled back. After a few moments she quietly said, "I've learned something after many years." "What is it?" they asked. She gently closed her journal. "The words we never say often become heavier than the words we finally speak." Those simple words remained with them long after they continued walking. Because your heart needs this right now, because carrying unspoken feelings can become a burden we were never meant to carry forever. Later they wandered into the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender stretched beneath the afternoon sun. An elderly gardener carefully removed tiny weeds from between healthy flowers. Curious, they asked, "Why remove weeds while they're still so small?" The gardener smiled kindly. "Because small problems become much harder to solve if we ignore them." Those words echoed deeply. Relationships are similar. Small misunderstandings. Small disappointments. Small unspoken feelings. If left unattended, they quietly grow larger. Honest conversations often remove those weeds before they take over the garden. Because your heart needs this right now, because healthy relationships require regular care and open communication. The afternoon breeze carried soft piano music from a nearby community performance. Only a handful of people paused to listen. Still, every note was played beautifully. Watching the musician reminded them that meaningful things rarely need loud attention. Kindness works quietly. Patience works quietly. Integrity works quietly. Forgiveness works quietly. Yet together they quietly transform lives. Because your heart needs this right now, because the greatest influences often arrive gently. Returning once more to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook again. The page quickly filled with fresh reflections. Today I realized something important. The urgent message isn't about fear. It's about honesty. It's about appreciating people while we still have the opportunity. It's about speaking gratitude before another day quietly passes. It's about replacing silence with kindness. Reading those words brought quiet peace. The burden they had carried for so long suddenly felt lighter. Not because every challenge had disappeared, but because they finally knew the direction they wanted their heart to follow. Because your heart needs this right now, because truth spoken with compassion often becomes the beginning of lasting peace. As afternoon slowly became evening, golden sunlight reflected across the calm lake. Families folded picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected on the title of this story. Your soulmate is saying, I need to tell you what happened today. It's very urgent, please open this. They smiled softly. The urgency wasn't about a mysterious prediction. It wasn't about a supernatural message. It wasn't about fear. The real urgency was remembering that life is precious. Kind words shouldn't always wait. Gratitude shouldn't always wait. Forgiveness shouldn't always wait. Honest conversations shouldn't always wait. Because your heart needs this right now, because today's sincere words can become tomorrow's treasured memories. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt peaceful. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, Tomorrow I will choose honesty over hesitation. Tomorrow I will express gratitude more freely. Tomorrow I will listen before assuming. Tomorrow I will forgive more quickly. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone whose words and actions reflect kindness, humility, and hope. Then they paused before writing one final reflection. Today I discovered that the most important message was never hidden inside mystery or urgency. It was the gentle reminder that life becomes richer when we speak with honesty, love with generosity, listen with compassion, and appreciate the people around us while we still have the opportunity. Those simple choices become the strongest foundation for every meaningful relationship. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer feared the words they had been carrying. Because they had learned that the greatest message is not one that predicts the future. It is the one that encourages us to live today with honesty, kindness, gratitude, forgiveness, and hope. And listen to this. The next morning arrived with the same quiet beauty that had greeted so many mornings before. Golden sunlight slowly spread across the room. A cool breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of fresh rain and blooming flowers. Birds welcomed another beautiful day with cheerful songs. Outside, the neighborhood slowly awakened. The corner bakery opened before sunrise, filling the street with the comforting aroma of warm bread. Children hurried toward school with backpacks bouncing behind them. Neighbors smiled while watering colorful gardens. Everything looked exactly the same. Yet inside one heart, everything had quietly changed. Yesterday's reflection had planted a seed. Today, that seed was beginning to grow. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting change often begins with one honest decision. Before beginning the day, they reached once again for the familiar notebook resting beside the window. Its pages had become trusted companions through many different seasons. Some pages held dreams. Some carried disappointment. Others contained lessons that had taken years to understand. They slowly turned to yesterday's final entry. The most important message is not one that predicts tomorrow. It is the reminder to love well today. Those words felt different now. Yesterday they had seemed comforting. Today they felt like a calling. Because your heart needs this right now, because wisdom becomes powerful when we choose to live it. After breakfast they returned to the familiar park. The old oak tree still stood proudly beside the peaceful lake. Its branches stretched toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes danced through the leaves. Families gathered beneath the shade. Children laughed while feeding ducks near the water. Everything invited quiet reflection. Finding the familiar wooden bench, they slowly sat down. Instead of searching for dramatic answers, they simply allowed themselves to be present. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace often grows where hurry disappears. Nearby, an elderly couple quietly shared breakfast together. They spoke only occasionally. Sometimes they smiled. Sometimes they simply enjoyed the silence. After several peaceful minutes, the husband softly said, "I'm thankful we still make time for mornings like this." His wife smiled warmly. "So am I." No dramatic speech. No perfect words. Only sincere appreciation. Watching them reminded the person that healthy relationships are often strengthened by simple moments repeated faithfully over many years. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude keeps relationships alive. As they continued walking, they noticed an elderly carpenter repairing an old wooden bridge crossing a quiet stream. Curious, they stopped. "Wouldn't it be easier to replace the bridge?" they asked. The carpenter smiled. "It would. But strong foundations deserve restoration." Those simple words echoed deeply. Relationships often need the same care. Misunderstandings create cracks. Silence creates distance. Fear weakens trust. Yet honesty, patience, compassion, and forgiveness can strengthen what once seemed fragile. Because your heart needs this right now, because restoration begins when people choose understanding instead of giving up. The morning slowly became afternoon. Walking beside the peaceful lake, they noticed a father teaching his young daughter how to fly a kite. The wind changed constantly. The kite rose. Then fell. Then rose again. The little girl sighed. "I'm not good at this." Her father smiled kindly. "You're learning. Every try teaches you something." Those words quietly settled into their heart. Meaningful conversations are much the same. Not every discussion is easy. Not every apology is perfect. Not every misunderstanding disappears immediately. But every sincere effort teaches people how to love more wisely. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth comes through practice rather than perfection. Later they wandered through the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender stretched beneath the afternoon sun. An elderly gardener carefully watered each flower. Curious, they asked, "Do flowers all bloom at the same time?" The gardener laughed softly. "No. Each flower has its own season. Trying to hurry them only causes harm." Those words lingered. People heal differently too. Some forgive quickly. Others need time. Some speak easily. Others need patience before finding the right words. Love makes room for those differences. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding grows where patience is practiced. The afternoon breeze carried soft violin music through the park. Only a few visitors paused to listen. Still, every melody was played with care. Watching the musician reminded them that beautiful things rarely demand attention. Kindness works quietly. Hope grows quietly. Integrity works quietly. Forgiveness works quietly. Yet together they shape lives in remarkable ways. Because your heart needs this right now, because quiet goodness leaves lasting influence. Returning once more to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook. Today's page quickly filled. Today I understand something new. The urgent message I believed I needed wasn't about fear. It was about courage. The courage to speak honestly. The courage to listen carefully. The courage to forgive. The courage to appreciate people while they are still beside us. Reading those words filled them with quiet peace. The burden they had carried for so long suddenly felt lighter. Not because every challenge had disappeared, but because they were finally walking in the right direction. Because your heart needs this right now, because honesty often brings freedom long before circumstances change. As afternoon slowly became evening, golden sunlight reflected across the calm lake. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected once again on the title of this story. Your soulmate is saying, "I need to tell you what happened today. It's very urgent, please open this." A gentle smile crossed their face. The real urgency had never been about panic. It wasn't about a hidden prediction. It wasn't about a mysterious secret. The real urgency was much simpler. Life moves quickly. Kind words should not always wait. Gratitude should not always wait. Forgiveness should not always wait. Meaningful conversations should not always wait. Because your heart needs this right now, because today's sincere words may become tomorrow's most treasured memories. As evening settled across the neighborhood, they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt peaceful. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will choose courage instead of hesitation. Tomorrow I will express appreciation more freely. Tomorrow I will listen before assuming. Tomorrow I will forgive more quickly. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone whose life reflects honesty, compassion, humility, and hope." They paused before writing one final reflection. "Today I discovered that the most important message wasn't hidden inside mystery or urgency. It was the quiet reminder that meaningful relationships are strengthened by everyday choices, listening with patience, speaking with kindness, forgiving with sincerity, and showing appreciation while there is still time. Those simple acts become the foundation of trust, peace, and lasting love." They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer feared the words they had been carrying. Because they had learned that the greatest message is not one that predicts the future. It is the one that inspires us to live today with honesty, gratitude, compassion, forgiveness, and hope. And listen to this. Several peaceful mornings had passed since that unforgettable day. The world looked exactly as it always had. The sun still climbed gently above the horizon. Birds still greeted the morning with cheerful songs. The neighborhood bakery still filled the streets with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children still laughed as they hurried toward school. Neighbors still waved while tending colorful gardens. Nothing around them seemed different. Yet inside one heart, everything had quietly changed. The fear that once whispered, "Keep everything inside," had begun losing its voice. In its place grew something stronger. Courage. Because your heart needs this right now, because courage often begins with one honest decision repeated every day. That morning they prepared breakfast without rushing. Steam curled gently from a warm cup of tea. Instead of reaching immediately for distractions, they sat quietly beside the window. Golden sunlight stretched across the floor. A soft breeze moved through the trees. An elderly neighbor smiled while feeding birds. A young father laughed as his little daughter chased bubbles across the yard. Tiny moments. Simple joys. For years they had searched for life-changing signs while overlooking the quiet beauty already surrounding them. Now they understood that peace often grows inside ordinary mornings. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude allows ordinary moments to become extraordinary memories. After breakfast they reached for the familiar notebook once again. Its pages had become more than paper. They had become companions through every season of life. Some pages held dreams. Others held disappointment. Many contained prayers written during uncertain nights. Several recorded lessons learned after painful experiences. Turning those pages reminded them of how far they had already come. Growth had never happened all at once. It happened one decision. One conversation. One apology. One act of kindness. One day at a time. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting transformation is built through small faithful choices. Opening to a fresh page, they slowly wrote. Today I choose courage again. They paused. Then another sentence followed. Not because fear has disappeared, but because I refuse to let fear make my decisions anymore. Reading those words brought unexpected peace. They realized bravery doesn't always mean feeling fearless. Sometimes bravery simply means choosing honesty while your heart is still uncertain. Because your heart needs this right now, because courage is moving forward even when everything isn't perfectly clear. Later that morning they returned to the familiar park. The towering oak tree welcomed another beautiful day. Its branches stretched confidently toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes danced through the leaves. The calm lake reflected drifting white clouds. Families gathered beneath shady trees. Children laughed while feeding ducks. Everything invited them to slow down. They found the familiar wooden bench overlooking the water. For several quiet minutes they simply listened. The wind. The birds. The gentle ripples. The laughter in the distance. Silence no longer felt lonely. It felt peaceful. Because your heart needs this right now, because a peaceful heart often hears wisdom more clearly. Nearby, an elderly grandfather helped his grandson build a small birdhouse. The child accidentally hammered one nail crooked. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The grandfather smiled warmly. "We'll straighten it together." The boy looked relieved. Watching them reminded the person of something important. Healthy relationships are not built because nobody makes mistakes. They grow stronger because people choose patience when mistakes happen. Because your heart needs this right now, because compassion creates room for growth. As the morning slowly became afternoon, they walked beside the peaceful lake. A young artist sat painting the scenery. Curious, they stopped to admire the work. "It looks beautiful," they said. The artist smiled. "It didn't begin that way." "What do you mean?" "The first sketch was messy. The second wasn't much better. But every mistake taught me something." Those words quietly settled into their heart. Relationships are often painted the same way. Every honest conversation. Every apology. Every lesson. Every act of forgiveness adds another beautiful brushstroke. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful relationships are created through continual learning. Later they wandered through the flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender bloomed beneath the afternoon sun. An elderly gardener carefully watered every flower. Curious, they asked, "How do you know which flowers need the most attention?" The gardener smiled kindly. "I pay attention every day. If you only visit once a year, you'll miss what they're trying to tell you." Those words echoed deeply. People are much the same. Sometimes they don't need perfect advice. Sometimes they simply need someone willing to notice how they're really doing. Because your heart needs this right now, because listening is one of the greatest gifts we can offer another person. The afternoon breeze carried soft guitar music across the park. Only a handful of people stopped to listen. Still, every note was played with remarkable care. Watching the musician reminded them that beautiful things rarely need loud attention. Integrity grows quietly. Patience grows quietly. Hope grows quietly. Forgiveness grows quietly. Yet together they quietly transform lives. Because your heart needs this right now, because the strongest influences often work gently. Returning once more to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook. Today's page filled naturally. Today I understand something new. The message I wanted to share was never about creating fear. It was about encouraging courage. The courage to say thank you. The courage to say I'm sorry. The courage to forgive. The courage to tell someone they matter while there is still time. Reading those words filled them with quiet joy. Not excitement. Not relief alone. A deeper confidence. The confidence that comes from living honestly. Because your heart needs this right now, because authenticity brings peace that pretending never can. As afternoon slowly became evening, golden sunlight reflected across the calm lake. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected again on the title of this story. Your soulmate is saying, I need to tell you what happened today. It's very urgent, please open this. A gentle smile crossed their face. The real urgency wasn't about panic. It wasn't about a hidden prediction. It wasn't about a mysterious event. The real urgency was remembering that love should not always wait. Kindness should not always wait. Gratitude should not always wait. Honest conversations should not always wait. Life quietly moves forward every day. Because your heart needs this right now, because today's sincere words may become tomorrow's greatest comfort. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt calm. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, Tomorrow I will choose honesty over hesitation. Tomorrow I will appreciate the people around me. Tomorrow I will forgive more quickly. Tomorrow I will listen more carefully. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone whose actions reflect kindness, humility, gratitude, and hope. Then they paused before writing one final reflection. Today I learned that the most important message isn't hidden inside mystery. It is the quiet reminder that life becomes richer when we love generously, listen patiently, forgive sincerely, and express appreciation without waiting for the perfect moment. Those simple choices shape every meaningful relationship and every peaceful heart. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many seasons, they no longer feared the words they once struggled to say. Because they had discovered that the greatest message is not one that predicts tomorrow. It is the one that encourages us to live today with honesty, compassion, gratitude, forgiveness, and hope. The final morning arrived wrapped in a quiet peace unlike anything they had experienced before. The first rays of sunlight slipped gently through the curtains, bathing the room in warm shades of gold. A cool breeze drifted through the open window carrying the scent of fresh rain and blooming flowers. Birds welcomed the dawn with cheerful songs. Outside, the neighborhood slowly awakened. The little bakery on the corner filled the street with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children laughed as they hurried toward school. Neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles. Everything appeared wonderfully ordinary. Yet inside one heart, something extraordinary had quietly happened. The fear that had once whispered, "Wait a little longer," had finally become silent. Hope had taken its place. Because your heart needs this right now, because real peace often begins when courage becomes stronger than fear. That morning they prepared breakfast slowly. There was no rush. No pressure. Only gratitude. A warm cup of tea rested beside the window while sunlight stretched across the wooden floor. For years they believed happiness would arrive after every unanswered question finally disappeared. Now they understood something very different. Happiness often begins when we stop waiting for perfect circumstances and start appreciating today's ordinary blessings. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude transforms ordinary mornings into unforgettable memories. After breakfast they reached once more for the familiar notebook. Its worn cover carried the marks of many seasons. Inside were dreams written during hopeful days. Prayers whispered during difficult nights. Questions that had slowly found answers. Mistakes that had quietly become lessons. Turning each page felt like meeting earlier versions of themselves. The fearful version. The impatient version. The uncertain version. The hopeful version. And finally, the peaceful version. They smiled softly. The notebook had never predicted the future. Instead, it had faithfully recorded the journey of one heart learning to choose honesty over fear. Because your heart needs this right now, because personal growth is one of life's greatest gifts. Only one blank page remained. They rested the pen gently against the paper. After several quiet moments, they began writing. Today I understand what the urgent message truly meant. It wasn't asking me to fear tomorrow. It was reminding me to appreciate today. It wasn't warning me about hidden mysteries. It was encouraging me to speak with kindness while I still have the chance. It wasn't about panic. It was about love. Reading those words filled their eyes with tears. Not tears of sadness. Tears of gratitude. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude often appears when we realize how much we have already grown. Later that morning they returned one last time to the familiar park. The old oak tree still stood proudly beside the peaceful lake. Its branches reached confidently toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes danced through the leaves. Sunlight shimmered across the calm water. Families gathered beneath shady trees. Children laughed while feeding ducks along the shoreline. Everything invited quiet reflection. They found the familiar wooden bench overlooking the lake. This time they weren't searching for answers. They simply sat in silence. Because your heart needs this right now, because contentment often arrives when we stop chasing certainty and begin embracing the present. Nearby, an elderly craftsman carefully restored an old wooden bench that had weathered many seasons. A curious child watched him work. "Why don't you buy a new one?" the child asked. The craftsman smiled warmly. "Because something that has been cared for deserves another chance. It may have scratches. It may have worn edges. But it still has strength." Those simple words settled deeply into their heart. People are often like that bench. Relationships are often like that bench. Life leaves marks. Mistakes leave scars. Time creates challenges. Yet patience, honesty, compassion, forgiveness, and understanding can restore what once seemed impossible to repair. Because your heart needs this right now, because healing begins when people choose restoration instead of giving up. The afternoon quietly unfolded. Golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. A father patiently taught his young daughter how to ride her bicycle. Every time she lost balance, he smiled. "You didn't fail. You learned." She laughed, stood up, brushed off the dust, and tried again. Watching them reminded the person that healthy relationships become safe places where people are free to learn without fear. Because your heart needs this right now, because encouragement often changes lives more than criticism ever can. Later they wandered through the flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender stretched beneath the afternoon sun. An elderly gardener carefully watered every flower. Curious, they asked, "Do flowers all bloom the same way?" The gardener smiled kindly. "No. Every flower has its own season. But every flower deserves patience." Those words quietly settled into their heart. People also grow differently. Some heal quickly. Others slowly. Some trust easily. Others need reassurance. Kindness makes room for every journey. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding grows wherever patience is practiced. Returning one final time to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook to its last blank page. Slowly they wrote, "Today I release fear. I release unnecessary worry. I release the belief that I must wait for perfect moments. Instead, I choose honesty. I choose compassion. I choose forgiveness. I choose gratitude. I choose humility. I choose hope." Reading those words brought quiet peace unlike anything they had experienced before. Because they finally realized that the greatest burden had never been uncertainty. The greatest burden had been believing they needed to carry everything alone. Because your heart needs this right now, because sharing truth with kindness often makes life's burdens lighter. As afternoon slowly became evening, the golden sunset painted the sky with beautiful shades of orange, pink, violet, and gold. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the peaceful lake, they reflected once more on the title of this story. Your soulmate is saying, I need to tell you what happened today. It's very urgent, please open this. A gentle smile crossed their face. The real urgency had never been about panic. It had never been about a supernatural warning. It had never been about predicting tomorrow. The real message was beautifully simple. Life is precious. Tell people they matter. Express gratitude while you still can. Forgive when healing is possible. Listen before judging. Speak truth with kindness. Love generously. Those quiet choices become life's greatest legacy. Because your heart needs this right now, because today's loving words may become tomorrow's treasured memories. As evening settled across the neighborhood, they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt calm. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time, they carefully wrote. If this journey has taught me anything, it is this. Never wait for the perfect moment to express kindness. Never assume people already know how much they matter. Tell them. Never allow fear to become louder than love. Never underestimate the power of one honest conversation. Never believe forgiveness is weakness. It is often the first step toward freedom. They paused before writing one final reflection. Tomorrow remains unwritten, but I no longer fear it. Whether life brings joyful celebrations, difficult conversations, unexpected opportunities, or quiet ordinary mornings, I choose to meet every day with honesty, patience, compassion, humility, gratitude, and hope. Those values may not remove every challenge, but they will guide every step I take and help me build relationships rooted in trust, respect, and genuine love. They gently closed the notebook. The journey had reached its final page. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many years, they no longer feared the future. Because they had discovered the greatest truth of all. The most important message was never hidden inside mystery. It was the quiet reminder that meaningful relationships are built through everyday honesty, patient listening, sincere forgiveness, grateful hearts, and compassionate actions. Those simple choices become the strongest foundation for a life filled with peace. The room became still. The stars filled the night sky. With a gentle smile, they turned off the light, ready to welcome tomorrow, not with fear, but with courage, wisdom, kindness, and hope.